I have a confession. I've been rendering my mixes offline for years. Okay, what do I mean by rendering? It's different in every DAW. So Pro Tools calls it bounce to disk. Studio One calls it export mixdown. I think Logic and GarageBand call it export song. It's simply the way you take your mix, whatever you're working on, and you have your software spit out a stereo file, whether it's an MP3 or a WAV or something else, that you can then put on a CD or put into iTunes and listen back. Okay, it has lots of different names. Some people call this printing the mix. Some people call it rendering, bouncing, exporting. It's all the same thing. Years ago, when we were working on analog machines, right, 24-inch tape machine, you would run all the channels through a mixer. You'd mix the song, and then the stereo out of that mixer, the left and right main mix bus, would go out into another machine, and you would record your mix. So the tracks would come 24 tracks into the mixer, 2 channels out to another recording device, like a half-inch tape machine. Was it half-inch? Yeah. Anyway, or a digital recorder or something like that. Fast forward to digital audio, and Pro Tools, for example, for years only had real-time rendering. So when you chose bounce to disk, you picked all your settings, then it would start playing the song from the beginning, and you'd have to listen all the way through. It just makes sense, right? Why would we not listen down as we render in real time? Well, a few years ago when I was doing a lot of podcasting, which I still do, a weekly podcast, at that point the podcast was like 45 minutes long. And I was using Pro Tools at the time, so when I was done editing and mixing that podcast and it was time to render, if it was a 45-minute podcast, I'd have to sit there for 45 minutes while it rendered in real time. And it really got to you if you made a mistake at minute 40, and you have to go back and fix that, you're back to 45 minutes of rendering. Not super fun. Now, there are obviously ways around that. Some folks like to route the audio back to a track and print that. So if there's a mistake, they can just rewind and then start recording where they left off. That's not the point of this today. All this to say, real-time rendering was the only game in town. The computers couldn't process it offline well enough to make it work. Well, fast forward to today, and pretty much all the DAWs will allow you to export your mix down offline, which means a 4.5-minute song might take 30 seconds for it to crunch the numbers and spit out a stereo file. And that's what I've been doing for years. That was originally one of the reasons I switched to Studio One by PreSonus, because it had offline bounce, and at the time Pro Tools didn't. The other day I was mastering a song, and a little a little voice in my head kept telling me, try to render it offline. Don't render it in real time. A few weeks ago, I was in West Virginia at a recording retreat where I was presenting and teaching some classes, but I also sat in on several classes, and Ronan Chris Murphy was the guy who headed up the whole deal. And he was doing a class on something, I think it was mastering, and he mentioned, just in passing, I never render or bounce offline. I always record the track. I always do it in real time, because rendering it offline there can be problems in the math as the computer's processing all of that, and sometimes it doesn't sound right. My first thought was, I guess that makes sense. My second thought was, well, I'm going to test that. I'm not just going to take it at face value. What if they sound exactly the same? The great news about a digital system is you can take 2 pieces of audio that you've rendered in 2 different ways. You can put them on 2 tracks, flip the phase of one of them, and see if they null out, which means see if there's silence on the track. If there's not, then you know there's at least some sort of a difference. So I was mastering a song for a client recently, and I decided to render one version out in real time of the final master. It's just a stereo 2-track master, and then to render another one offline. Then I brought those 2 WAV files into a new session, lined them up with each other, and then flipped the polarity of one. Guess what? There was a difference. There was some high frequency stuff coming through on one of them, or when I had them both playing at the same time with one of them with a flipped polarity, there was some sound coming through. Does that mean that one is better than the other? I don't know, but it does mean they're different. And it wasn't MP3 versus WAV. These were both exported with the exact same settings, only one was real time and one was offline, which exported more quickly. So then I listened to both of them side by side, and I would flip back and forth between the 2 and compare the sounds. And that's when it got really interesting. There was a noticeable difference in sound. It wasn't mind-blowing, it wasn't earth-shattering. I'm not embarrassed of all the music I've done that I've rendered offline up to this point, but I am considering if I need to transition to doing it in real time. Before I tell you what I heard and the differences between the 2, I want you to actually download the tracks and listen for yourself. So I'm providing a little bit of a sample, just a small, maybe 30-second clip of each. And I'm not going to tell you which one is which until tomorrow's video, where I'll come back and we'll talk through it. But I want you to take that, put it into your session, and then just flip back and forth between the two and listen. You can flip the polarity of one to hear the little bit of differences that are there, but then more importantly, just listen to each one and go back and forth and just note the differences. It's a blind test, so you don't know which one is which. And leave a comment below this video and tell me which one you like, one or two, which one you think is better, and then also which one you think is the real-time versus offline. I think this will be really interesting, and I'll be back tomorrow with a video showing you which one is which, revealing who is who, and then talking a little bit through that and what I heard when I listened down on my system. All right, that's it. The links are below. Go download, go listen, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Bye.